An ordinary day at the zoo took a shocking turn when a little boy fell into the gorilla enclosure. The crowd was frozen in horror, expecting the worst, but what happened next took everyone by surprise. Was it a moment of danger or an unexpected act of compassion? Will this story change the way you look at animals? Watch until the end, you will be amazed. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more incredible stories. The gorilla in Jura has always been a favorite place for children, but today something was different. The playful gorilla, known for his silverback, was unusually sedentary. He sat motionless in the far corner of the enclosure, absent-mindedly chewing on a branch. His dark eyes were thoughtful, a stark contrast to his usually lively demeanor. The ordinary young boy swung and climbed and entertained the crowd, who laughed and cheered as the adults lifted their children onto their shoulders to get a better view. Ben's mother tried to focus on the gorillas, but her restless toddler had other plans. She warned him to stay away, but he didn't listen. His tiny fingers curled around the railing as he leaned forward, eyes wide with wonder. He peered into the enclosure, mesmerized by the creatures that seemed to justify his disobedience in his young mind, his eyes widening and a small smile appearing on his face. One moment Ben was holding onto the railing, the next he was gone. A faint gasp, a blur of movement, a thud, and then silence. His mother's scream pierced the air. Everyone turned, gasping as they realized what had happened. "Oh God, Ben," she screamed again, seeing her child lying face down. He was unharmed, but clearly too stunned to move. He just fell over. "My baby," she screamed, alerting the zookeepers. The staff rushed to the enclosure and peered inside. "We'll get him out, ma'am," they assured her, and she nodded, clutching her necklace. Several people silently judged her for turning away, but they didn't say it. She knew the zookeepers were worried, but she had to try desperately to save her baby. She looked around for any way to get to him. And then her eyes met the gaze of a huge 400-pound gorilla standing at the far end of the enclosure. Turned her head in the direction of the noise, the branch falling from her mouth as she began to move forward, the ground shaking under her footsteps, and someone in the crowd shouted, "Stop her." When finally spoke, it was a low, guttural sound. The zookeeper who returned with the keys and some tools immediately ran to the emergency room for a tranquilizer. Meanwhile Ben's mother panicked and held out her shaking hands as if trying to pull her child out of the nightmare, but Ka didn't stop and the growing crowd stood frozen watching the tragedy unfold. Some started to cry while others turned away. "What do you think will happen before the keepers arrive?" the onlookers wondered as Ka's massive body blocked out the sun and the crowd braced themselves for horror. The parents held their children tighter expecting an attack, but instead the 400-pound gorilla did what no one expected. It didn't hit or pull teeth or growl. Its massive arm gently held the tiny boy in its arms, lifting him up with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a creature its size. Those who had their eyes closed opened them, but Ben's mother continued to watch in horror. She sobbed as her baby disappeared into the arms of something wild and untamed but harmless, his body feeling so small in her arms, his lips trembling, and for a moment he looked like he was going to cry, but then Ka did something even more unexpected. She pulled him to her chest and began to rock him gently. A low, guttural sound came from her chest, a mixture of a hum and a warning. She even pressed her wide lips to his forehead in what could only be described as a kiss. Ben's mother shuddered in horror. At that moment the zookeepers returned with walkie-talkies and tranquilizers, but none of them were expecting this. He turned to the still trembling mother and tried to comfort her. She was comforting him. He noticed, but Harris, the head zookeeper, knew why. He immediately turned to the crowd. "Do you think the baby is dead?" Paris had worked with Ka for years. He watched her grow into a powerful matriarch, protecting her cub from danger. He had witnessed her grief just a month ago when she lost her cub to illness. For days, she refused to let go of its lifeless body. Unable to accept that he was gone, when the zookeepers finally took him away, she went into a frenzy, hiding in the corners of the enclosure, searching for her lost child. A heavy silence fell over the crowd as they realized what was happening. The expectation of violence gave way to understanding and grief. All eyes turned to S.A., filled with pity. But the scene quickly turned to concern as they realized another important detail. K was not letting go of Ben. S had given them hope. As she approached the iron fence, everyone thought she would give up the child, but she simply turned around. People began to talk to the zookeepers, hoping they could gently persuade her. However, the staff could not act recklessly if they moved too quickly or frightened S.A. She might feel threatened and fight back. A mother who protects her child, be it human or animal, becomes the most dangerous creature. Ben, a small boy playing peacefully in his enclosure, suddenly stirred and looked around, making a small noise. His mother clenched her fists. His mother screamed as she watched. He felt terror and was moved by compassion. He took a step toward the gate, though he moved slowly, enough to cause panic among the onlookers. What would the gorilla do? They wondered. She raised her head, bared her ivory fangs, then turned and retreated quickly into the rocky part of her pen. The crowd gasped and Ben's mother screamed. Harris watched the scene and felt his stomach twist with fear. S.A. quickly climbed the rocky ledge, dragging her child behind her. Someone in the crowd screamed. Ben's mother sobbed. Her screams pierced the air. No, please stop, don't take my child. A was fast. She climbed without a sound until she reached the top. The higher 7 she climbed. The more panic spread through the crowd. They knew if Ben slipped, not for a second they didn't want to think about what might happen. Harris's radio crackled and a voice said, "We have a tranquilizer." Harris froze, his fingers hovering over the button. C turned and their eyes met, her eyes pleading, but he shook his head. If they shot her she might fall, and that was unthinkable. He gritted his teeth and said, "Don't shoot," but the voice insisted. "I said don't shoot." Harris turned to the others. The keepers surrounded him. He had options now. He ordered, "If we do this they will act," but a sharp crack made them stop. They turned to see. Car reached the next ledge, but the rock slipped out from under her foot. Harris's pulse quickened and soon she was at the top. Ben, nestled in the gorilla's arms, began to regain consciousness. He looked around in panic, watching the birds fly past as they descended. His mother was still in despair and continued to scream. She pressed herself against the railing as if trying to break the iron bars. The zookeepers were furious. "We can lure her back now," another keeper was suggested. Harris quickly agreed. He knew what to do. He had the keys to the side gate in his pocket. He said the keys were here and the gate was open. Harris stepped forward and the crowd began to whisper what he was doing. They asked if he was going to go in. Oh God, he was going to die, but Ben's mother looked at him hopefully. "Please," she whispered. Harris swallowed hard and said, "Bring him back." He stepped into the enclosure and the gate slammed shut behind him, wasting no time. He hurried to the rock where the Ka stood and called out, "Ka, come back," but the gorilla didn't answer. She took another step and the baby's tiny legs hung limply in her arms. The risk was enormous, but Harris took another step forward. Then he pulled something out of his pocket, a faded, worn blanket, neatly folded. It was the same blanket she had wrapped around her own child a few weeks before he died. Kay looked down and Harris saw the change in her eyes. Hesitation and confusion. She recognized the blanket she was holding and buried her face in it and inhaled the scent of her baby. Harris lifted the blanket and said, "It was yours, darling." All he wanted her to do was come down, but Kay's pupils dilated. She looked at the boy in her arms, then down at the blanket and then at the world around her. She paused as if making a decision, then took a deep breath and took the first step down. A rush of fresh air filled her lungs and Har couldn't believe it. Everything seemed to freeze as she went down, each step echoing with hope. Ben's mother pressed herself against the railing, whispering what could have been a prayer or her baby's name. The descent was slow and Harris continued to encourage her. Finally, when she was only 20 feet from the ground, Kay landed. Harris carefully stepped forward and at that moment another zookeeper tossed her an orange, her favorite fruit. Kay picked it up and handed it to Harris. Her pupils dilated again, but she held the baby tighter and moved closer to him so that one movement was enough. Harris lunged forward and grabbed the boy and ripped him out of her arms. Relief rushed through the crowd. Ben's mother ran towards the locked gate screaming with joy. Harris followed her with equal relief, but soon he stopped clutching the baby's tiny hands and started crying. When he reached the gate, his mother was already there. She fell to her knees and hugged her baby and burst into tears, covering his hair and cheeks with kisses. "Oh my baby," she whispered. "Oh my God, my baby, thank you," she told Harris. Harris, still worried, sat up straight and smiled. Ben was safe inside the enclosure. Kaa stood motionless, wrapped in a blanket, watching them with her dark orange eyes, her gaze fixed on the child, who was rushing between Harris and Ben. She found her baby again. Harris swallowed hard as he realized this wasn't Kaa attacking, a grieving mother trying to fill her void. No anger or aggression, only loss. She faded into the shadow outside the zoo and the news spread quickly. Videos taken by the crowd went viral and even made it onto television. Everyone watching was amazed. This sparked a debate about animal intelligence. Some didn't expect gorillas to be so emotional. Some called for stricter zoo rules while others demanded that be released into the sanctuary, and some, perhaps those who truly understood, saw Kaa as more than just an animal but a being capable of deep emotion. Harris, who usually loved to give interviews, declined most of them but did make a statement that she was not attacking, she was grieving. The phrase spread on social media and people began sharing stories of their own losses and encounters with grieving animals. They sent gifts and donations to the zoo in Kaa's name. Some wrote letters urging the zoo to help her. The zoo management held an emergency meeting to discuss Kaa's future and how to help her heal. They eventually made a decision. They found her an orphan gorilla, helpless and sad, just like C, when the cage door opened and the baby gorilla fell into the enclosure. Kay didn't hesitate. She walked over to the baby, who made a small nervous sound. She reached out and pulled him close and hugged him. The keepers breathed a sigh of relief. It worked. A few tears disappeared, and that was the end of Kaa's story. This story shows how deep grief can be, especially when it comes to the loss of a child. It is a pain that defies explanation. She also teaches us that motherhood is a universal bond that unites us all, whether we are animal parents or human parents. Don't miss more incredible animal stories.